everybody, welcome to another YouTube video. My name is Kaya with exercisesforinjuries.com. Today we're going to be talking about ways that you can reverse a posterior pelvic tilt. So when I did a video on anterior pelvic tilt, I had a request to also do a video on posterior pelvic tilt and ways that you can reverse that. So, do you know if you have a posterior pelvic tilt? You'll probably know based on some key characteristics and also your posture, obviously. So the characteristics of a posterior pelvic tilt are more or less opposite to that of an anterior pelvic tilt. And so what we're really talking about is if your pelvis is rotated anteriorly, that means forward, posteriorly, backwards. So a posterior pelvic tilt is kind of that, what would be referred to as a sway back posture. So the pelvis is tilted backwards, and usually that also is accompanied by a kind of swaying back posture. So kind of looking like that. I've got a bit of an anterior tilt, so it's hard for me to get into a posterior tilt. And then seated, that's kind of that classic like slumping forward, so the pelvis is tucked back and slumping in a chair with the pelvis out in front of the back. So that happens for a variety of reasons, some of those being tight hamstrings and glutes, right? So it's pulling that low back towards the back of the body, as well as tight abdominals, right? Because when you're in this kind of posture, the core is kind of crunched in front and the pelvis is being pulled down. And then, so those are your tight muscles. Then in terms of your weak muscles, weak lumbar extensors, so those muscles that extend the spine, weak quads, and weak hip flexors. So for a lot of us, it's opposite. More common is an anterior pelvic tilt, but some people definitely suffer from a posterior pelvic tilt, and it can predispose you to things like injury in the discs in your lumbar spine, right? Because we're supposed to have that natural curvature in the low back, and with the posterior pelvic tilt, it's pretty much flat. So we do want to, go over how we can address that. So we're going to go through 6 things. Really what we're going to do is 3 are kind of going to be stretching, releasing things to release those tight muscles, and then 3 are going to be strengthening to strengthen the weak muscles. So the first thing that we're going to do is a glute roll. So glutes being one of the muscles that is characteristically tight in a posterior pelvic tilt. So I'm grabbing my roller, coming down to the ground. So I'm going to do one side at a time. So I'm kind of coming on to the roller at an angle. I'm going to cross my ankle over my knee and get into the glutes. Now everyone's going to have a different area that's tightest. So that's a great thing about rolling, is you get to decide exactly where you roll and exactly how much pressure you want to apply. So we definitely want it to be uncomfortable. We want to be getting into those tissues, into that fascia, but always making sure that you can take deep breaths while you do it. So we're going to aim for 30 seconds to a minute on each side. And then we'd switch to the other side. Same thing, crossing my ankle over, rolling back and forth, and deciding how much pressure you want to apply down onto the glutes. Right, so once you've done your 30 to 60 seconds of that, we'll put the roller to the side. Next thing, we're going to go through hamstring stretch. So another one of those tight muscles in a posterior pelvic tilt. So you probably know there's a bunch of ways you can stretch your hamstrings. You can do this from seated, from on the ground. I'll go through a standing one. So I'm just going to step one forward in front, bring those toes back up off the ground, and start to hinge forward over that leg. If there's any pain in the knee, just leave a slight bend. No need to hyperextend the knee. Deep breaths, and again, we'll aim for 20 to 30 seconds on each side here. You can also roll out your hamstrings, or you can do this exact stretch from seated. Or if you're on your back, you can put a strap underneath one foot and bring that foot up off the ground above you. Good, so however way you're stretching out your hamstrings. And then finally, we're going to stretch out the front of the body, the abdominals, by doing a cobra or an up dog. So I'm going to get down onto the ground. So cobra being forearms or hands staying on the ground. And then up dog is going to be coming all the way up onto my arms and actually lifting my knees. So starting with a cobra, I'm just going to use my hands to kind of press away from the floor. So generally when we do a cobra in yoga, we're not using our hands too much because we're more so working our back muscles. Right now we want to stretch out the abs. So I am going to use my hands to press up. No pain or too much compression in the low back though. If there is, you need to come down and ease out of it. So you can hang out here stretching through the front of the body, gaze can come forward. Or if you feels better, you can do it in reps. So exhaling down and inhaling up. And then if you're coming into an upward dog, you can come all the way up. You're on the tops of the feet, up on the hands. But this can be a little bit tough if you don't have enough core strength. It can start to hurt or pinch into the low back, in which case we want to come back down into that cobra. Either way, we're either going to do 10 breaths coming up and down, or holding for 20 to 30 seconds. All right, so those are our 3 stretching, releasing kind of exercises. Moving on to strength, we're going to do a squat. So I'm going to grab a weight, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it out in front of me. I'm going to take a bit of a wider stance. Now having this weight up, holding it on top of my chest is kind of going to automatically force me to open up my chest forward. So as I come down to the squat, pushing my bum back, I'm making sure I can keep that tilt in the pelvis, I can keep that curve in my low back as I come down. And if you start to lose that tilt, then that's where you need to stop and come back up. So no hunching forward as we come down, we're keeping that pelvis coming forward. We have that curve in the low back, and then we're coming down. And we're going to go for 10 to 15 squats. Keeping that chest open, the shoulders are back. So we're retraining the muscles here to be in that neutral spine, even a little bit into an anterior tilt here. Good, so you do 10 to 15 of those. All right, we're gonna do back extensions next. So lots of ways you can do this. I'll show you one with a stability ball, but what you can do is that same cobra that we were doing before, but not using the hands for support, just using the back. On a stability ball, you're coming forward. We're gonna bring those hands behind the head to open up the chest, and a back extension is just bringing the torso up as far as I can and coming down. So I'm using those back extensor muscles, and I'm bringing that curve back into my low back. So inhale up, exhale down. Good, so on the ground, this could look like our cobra. Inhaling up, exhale down. Keep that gaze down. We're keeping the neck in line with the spine. Good. So again, 10 to 15 reps of those. And on to our final exercise, hip hinge. So this is, you're probably going to get a bit of a hamstring stretch with this one as well. Kind of get a double bonus in it. But it's also going to train our nervous system what it feels like to be in a more anterior pelvic tilt. So standing up tall, check your posture. If you're kind of coming into this posture, trying to line up so that your shoulders are on top of your hips. So you're probably going to need to tilt that pelvis forward. Hands come behind the head, slight bend in the knees, core is engaged, and I'm just hinging forward at my hips. Take your time. If you start to feel yourself coming back into that tilt, bring it back. If you can't, then that's where you stop, come back up. So we're trying to hinge forward while keeping that curve in the low back. So you might need to think about tilting your tailbone up towards the ceiling, maintaining that anterior tilt the entire time for 10 to 15 slow and controlled reps. Good. All right, so those are your 6 exercises you can do to reverse your posterior pelvic tilt. If you like this video, leave it a like. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out exercisesforinjuries.com. There's a little search bar there. You can type in your injury or pain or any questions that you have, and there's bound to be an article or an interview or something on there that can help you out. So thanks for joining me. My name's Kaya, and we'll see you next time. Bye.